Shortly after negotiations between the US and Iran over Iran's nuclear program failed, Israel first announced that it was prepared to attack Iran and then ultimately did so. Israel has now struck military and nuclear targets in Tehran and has hit. Bitcoin has dropped by 4% and Ethereum by 10%. The price of oil has risen by $15. Panic selling led to over $1 billion in crypto liquidations within 24 hours, with $300 million of that occurring in the last few hours. And hopefully this doesn't escalate any further, not so much because of the markets, but for the sake of humanity. But before you panic sell now, let me show you why that might be a huge mistake. Of course, it feels frustrating. We were on such a good run, we're close to reaching new all-time highs, and then this news breaks. Israel wants to attack Iran over its nuclear program, the US is withdrawing personnel from the region, and then Israel attacks Iran. Trump said that Iran must not have nuclear weapons, and the tensions kept rising and rising until they escalated. So what happened now? Iran even tested a new missile, and everyone then feared problems with oil, especially if the Strait of Hormuz were to be blocked. Oil prices had already risen to $69, and the markets were bracing for chaos. Additionally, the nuclear watchdog had accused Iran of violations, which could have given the US and others a reason to attack. In response, Iran threatened missile attacks on Israel. So the whole situation became really uncomfortable, and then the attack happened. Nevertheless, we can see how everything is completely getting out of control. Israel then decided to bomb Iran, and today the news is just overflowing. Bitcoin is basically in free fall and has dropped by 4%, briefly even hitting $102,000 per Bitcoin in a very short time. In contrast, oil prices are skyrocketing. This is because Iran is located at the strategically important Strait of Hormuz. About 14 to 20% of the world's oil is transported through the Strait of Hormuz, which amounts to around 21 million barrels per day. It connects the Persian Gulf with the Arabian Sea and is the main route for oil tankers from countries such as Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates, for example. Disruption, for example due to conflicts, Iranian threats, or Israeli missile strikes, could drive up prices and destabilize the global economy. And Iran is strategically positioned at this bottleneck and could potentially block and, of course, influence the price of oil. This gives the country considerable influence in international negotiations and turns the strait into a means of leverage, for example, during tensions with the US or other regional players. And from the White House comes a clear statement: Israel is acting independently, or rather acted independently, in the attack on Iran. We are not involved, they said, but our focus is on protecting American troops. At the same time, Iran is warning of retaliation and is apparently preparing a declaration of war against Israel. And if you are thinking of trading today because of this news, which I do not recommend, use low leverage, set tight stop losses, and be cautious. And what's interesting is that markets have often historically overreacted to such events. For example, during the Russia-Ukraine conflict, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Bitcoin only dropped 16%. On October 7, 2023, during the attack on Israel, the low point actually marked the beginning of a 165% rally. And currently, indicators like the RSI or MACD are extremely oversold. A short-term recovery is therefore likely. Nevertheless, the situation remains precarious. If the US becomes directly involved, Bitcoin could fall to $77,000 or even $70,000 per Bitcoin. In that case, oil would be the clear winner. It has already risen by 15%. However, I am bullish in the long term. Bitcoin is a shield against inflation and global uncertainty, and BlackRock has said the same. The value of Bitcoin rises when trust in governments wanes. And once again, when a threat of war emerged, the markets crashed at first, or also when a war broke out or there was an attack. Think of Russia, Ukraine, or Israel, Gaza. Prices fell, but within 1 to 2 weeks, they were back up again. If you sold back then, you ended up kicking yourself afterwards, and I showed you in the past how you could trade such events smartly, and we'll talk about that again in a moment. 3 such situations were happening simultaneously just now, and they were meant to make you sell your Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And before we continue, if you want to support the channel, like the video, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. First of all, don't let the headlines drive you crazy. In February, it was about tariffs. Now it's Israel and Iran. Before that, it was Ukraine and Russia, and so on. Just take a look at Tesla. In April, when the media reported on vandalism at Tesla, people sold and afterwards the price rose by over 40%. Or consider the supposed Trump-Elon Musk dispute. Tesla's stock price dropped to $272, and 3 days later it was at $324, 20% gain in a single weekend. Those who follow the news lose. And watch out, the next story will be the debt ceiling in the US. The US can't borrow anymore. Democrats and Republicans have to negotiate. There will be more drama again, but don't let yourself get caught up in it. The US Secretary of the Treasury even recently said that if the debt ceiling isn't raised, it could trigger the worst debt crisis since 2008, which of course puts individual investors under pressure. And now everyone is worried, what will happen if the US doesn't raise the debt ceiling? And just imagine, the USA, which supports the world economy with its currency and has $37 trillion in debt, could go bankrupt. That would throw everything into chaos. And the news is already screaming about a huge financial crisis like in 2008, and everyone seems to be panicking. And we already had this on January 19th, 2023, a Thursday. Democrats and Republicans argued, the markets trembled. And just take a look at the SP 500 from back then, the prices dropped because everyone was afraid. And yet, every time the debt ceiling was raised. Why? Because neither party can afford for the USA to become insolvent. So they have until July, and until then there will be a lot of talk about the debt ceiling, and we'll be hearing a lot about it. The media will go wild as if the world is ending, but I bet that in the end, at the last minute, they'll come to an agreement and raise the limit, probably by $4 trillion. This game repeats itself over and over again. That means if this makes you nervous or you want to get out, maybe you shouldn't be trading or investing in the markets. So how can you deal with it now? Have a clear strategy and stick to it, no matter what the headlines say. Some friends of mine don't read any news at all, they just look at the charts. And here's a tip, trade against your emotions. For example, have two accounts, one where you trade normally and another where you do the opposite of what your gut feeling tells you. And when Elon Musk was under attack, for instance, you could have bought Tesla instead of selling. Your opinion is shaped by the media and Twitter, and today all the headlines are screaming about the war between Israel and Iran. Theoretically you should sell, but I say buy Bitcoin and check back in a month. Our long-term strategy is clear. Bitcoin is being adopted by institutions and maybe even countries. Stablecoins are booming, Ethereum is outperforming Bitcoin, and then comes the altcoin rally. That will probably be the future. Whether the debt ceiling is raised or Israel continues the war, none of that changes our plan. Large companies like MicroStrategy are holding Bitcoin, and if the price rises above $119,000 per Bitcoin in a quarter, MicroStrategy could achieve the highest quarterly profit ever of any company. This shows that those who hold on and don't let themselves be influenced by the news or the media's fear-mongering can gain a lot. And if it actually happens that MicroStrategy posts the highest quarterly profit of all time, it will make a lot of companies take notice. This will lead to many companies starting to rethink things and probably also investing in Bitcoin. We could see a domino effect here. And then there's the Genius Act, which has passed through the Senate in the US, and that's a pretty big deal. There are still a few formal votes left because the Democrats have some objections, but essentially the law has passed. But what exactly is the Genius Act? Quite simply, it's a law intended to regulate stablecoins in the US, and stablecoins are cryptocurrencies that are pegged to something stable like the US dollar. They are supposed to offer the advantages of crypto, such as fast digital transactions, but without the wild price fluctuations you see or can see with Bitcoin or Ethereum. The goal of the Genius Act is to establish clear rules so that stablecoins become safer and more reliable. And Scott Bessent, the US Secretary of the Treasury, had something interesting to say about this again. Legislation that backs stablecoins with US Treasury bonds will expand the use of the US dollar worldwide through these coins. So the US Secretary of the Treasury believes that this could bring in up to $2 trillion, maybe even more. And at the moment, only $250 million are running through blockchain systems, so that would be a gigantic leap. And they see this as an opportunity to further establish the US dollar as a global currency by allowing stablecoins to carry it digitally everywhere. And there's a lot happening in the financial world as well. Bank of America is now fully committing to stablecoins, and suddenly everyone is talking about it. Here's an example. Plasma, a stablecoin chain from Tether, recently raised $250 million and not long ago managed to raise an incredible $500 million in just 33 minutes. And that happened even though no one was talking about the Israel-Iran conflict. And this shows how much potential stablecoins have, no matter what else is happening in the world. Then there's Stripe, one of the largest payment providers in the world. They recently acquired Piwi, a crypto wallet provider, for an undisclosed amount. And this comes shortly after they acquired Bridge for $1.1 billion with a payment volume of $1.4 trillion, which is 38% more than last year. Could this now mean that Stripe is planning a crypto payment solution for millions of users? And that sounds like a pretty big move, doesn't it? So how can you take advantage of this for yourself? There are two approaches. First, stick to your convictions, no matter what the headlines say. If you believe that stablecoins and crypto are the future, then stick with it, even when the news is full of crises, like an Israeli attack on Iran or debt problems in the US. Second, use the headlines, but do the opposite of what they suggest to you. When the media is spreading panic, for example because of an attack on Iran or the Elon Trump drama, then buy instead of selling. On the other hand, if they are announcing big highs, sell. Personally, I am often guided by emotions, and that's exactly why I often act against my first impulse. Give it a try, and if you want to build financial independence through Bitcoin and crypto, click the link in the description below the video. Remember, we will very likely see the Bitcoin price continue to rise, even as we are now witnessing this attack by Israel on Iran.